I start. Very good. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Chicago IANDS today. It's great to see so many of you back. Last month, we had an unfortunate situation where our speaker, Jack Bonsick, passed away a couple of weeks before the meeting. And so we had a sharing session, and it was a very small group, but we had some really interesting and productive discussions. It's on the website, and you can watch that if you have any interest in going back to see what we talked about. But today, we have a whole new thing going on. We've got some interesting people coming up. I wanted to mention quickly, our speaker next month is a Catholic priest. His name is Father Nathan Castle. This is his book. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it, or is it coming in and out?
Sort of comes in and out, Diane.
Okay, it's called Afterlife Interrupted, Helping Stuck Souls Cross Over. So he goes and helps people who are having a hard time after they cross, and helps them to get things straightened out and going the right direction. And he's a very interesting guy. He's in California, and he will be our speaker next month. So I hope you can join us for that. We're going to take a moment and do a quick meditation with flute. And if you have things on your lap, or you're not in a situation where you feel comfortable, try to get yourself comfortable so you can relax and allow yourself to drift into a very short little meditative space, which helps to change the energy and connect us all in a positive way. welcome back. So as I said, next month is Reverend Nathan Castle, our father, I guess it's father, Catholic priest. We look forward to seeing you all then. We don't have any plans yet to come back into the hospital. Still hoping for more suppression of bugs. Lena, who's on here somewhere, is a new leader of Las Vegas IANDS. She said that at the IANDS conference in August, a number of people did get COVID. I didn't go to it. I've gone almost every year since 1997, but I didn't go the last 2 years because I'm getting so old and I've had health challenges and I don't want to pick up anything, and it just seems not necessary to do. I've been to so many and so on and so forth, but it's great to see you all, and I've been fortunate to meet Loreli, who does a lot of work with IANDS, and she's had 4 near-death experiences, and we are really excited to hear what she has to tell us about it. So quickly, before I get her started, I want to just make a note that, we would appreciate any donations. We haven't had, we've had almost no donations for the last few months, and we have ongoing expenses I have to pay for the services that run the emails and the phone lines and all these things, and we'd appreciate it. We request a $20 donation. Nobody's turned away, and so I just say, please send us whatever your fair share is, and you're the only one who knows what your share is. So we would appreciate that. So now I'm going to turn the meeting over to Loreli and I welcome her with lots of good energy, and she's has a wonderful story. So it's all yours.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you all at Chicago IANDS for having me here today. As Diane said, I'm Loreli Drache. That's like a name. You saw probably 2 names on the newsletter. That's like the spiritual name my mother and my family gave me. So, that's the name I go by. And as she said, I've had 4 near-death experiences and many spiritually transformative experiences since I was very young. My first recollection, it's odd because I have to say this, and as a near-death experiencer, that I don't have very many memories other than pivotal points in my life where my energy kind of switched or went, or something happened that was monumental, so to speak, since my experiences. So my first memory is my near-death experience at age 7. I lived in rural Burlington, Wisconsin, on about 191 acres. It was the farm, but it also used to be a quarry. So there was lots of different sites there that they dug out for various gravel and stone. And well, they had natural springs. There was a lot of natural springs underneath there. So we had what we called the swimming hole and the fishing hole was the main ones we visited. Well, on this particular day, it was late in the afternoon. My parents, I think my dad was working. He worked for Chrysler, so he worked 6-7 days a week. We didn't see him very often. So my mom was there with all of us kids. I think there was still 3 of us home at that time. My older brother wanted to go check out the fish. It was a time of year when bluegills spawned. So he wanted to go and check out the pond. And since my mom was cooking supper, she's like, take your sister with you. My aunt and uncle were visiting. So they said they'd take us down there to watch over us because my brother is, 6 years older. So he only would have been about 13 at that time. So they took us down. It's kind of like about a half mile or so back on the property to go. So we walked down there. My brother and my uncle stopped at the first entrance where the bluegills, like I said, spawned. It was like maybe like a foot deep. It was the driveway through there that had flooded when they hit the springs. So anyway, my aunt and I decided I really wanted to go check out the other end. That's where the swimming area was. It was about 30 foot deep that they had built a pier out. And there was like a small side pond off of that got tons of frogs, and that's where all the like tadpoles were. So that was like my favorite area to go. But I walked down on this pier that they built out. It was kind of like an embankment, like a clay embankment, going down into the quarry, and then the pier went outwards. So I made my way down there, and I was at the end of the pier. And my aunt, she was nervous around water. It's notable she couldn't swim, and neither could I. So so I was walking out there, and you know, the usual things of be careful and all that. And so I was looking off to the left, on the left side of the pier. And like I said, it was like when the sun starts to go down, so there was like a lot of reflection off the water, and I just felt like almost mesmerized, like I was being sucked in almost. You know, it was this weird thing, like, and I felt like I was moving with the water. So I'm like, oh, I shook it off, and I moved to the other side on the right there. At that time, my aunt's like, do you mind? I'm gonna go check on your uncle. She had kind of separation anxiety. Like they did not go anywhere without each other other than he went to work, kind of thing. Anyway, so she wanted to go check on him. She's like, are you gonna be okay? Can you behave? You know, the usual. And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. So she headed down the path, and it's notable that this path is like overgrown with trees. So it made like a you know, like a tunnel that you would walk through. So once she got in there, she couldn't see where I was or what was happening to me. So to this day, I have no recollection. I remember just sitting there and looking at the water for a moment. The next memory I have of it, I was underwater. And this is the weird part, foot first. Like if you fell from being lulled, wouldn't you fall head first? I mean, like dive over. But I was foot first, thinking in the water. And I remember like almost simultaneously that I was seeing that happen. And as soon as I like gasped, you know, and I saw all the air bubbles coming up, and I'm like, all of a sudden I'm like, if I take a breath in, I'm going to drown. I'm going to die. And as soon as that thought clicked in my head, I was outside of my body, watching it sink. And so, you know, so I went in feet first, and I saw my hands just slowly sinking, my hair like floating out in the water. And then I turned, you know, I felt like I was about, like my consciousness was like 20 foot above the whole scene. It was localized to that scene. And then all of a sudden I could hear my brother's thoughts, because I assumed they must have heard me fall in, you know, and I could see my aunt panicking and running back to, you know, down that trail. And my brother's like thinking, can I run to her or swim there faster? And I remember in spirit, I was kind of chuckling, because I'm just like, you can't do either very fast. You know, it didn't even make sense to me. So I was kind of laughing at him. And then my uncle panicked, because, you know, they're supposed to be watching me. I'm a 7-year-old kid that my aunt left out on a pier. And so he freaked out that way, like they're going to blame us. And my aunt was trying to figure out, when I connected with her consciousness, like, how am I going to get to her? I can't swim either. We're both going to drown. How do I get down there? How do I get her? And she made her way to the end and hung on to, like, there was some core posts on the edges, you know, to get me. But that was simultaneously with my experience going forward. So as soon as I heard all of that, I realized, yeah, you know, I'm out of body. I died, you know, and then I rose higher in the scene, and then I could see for miles, like our whole neighborhood. And then I connected with my mom's consciousness, and she was back in the kitchen chopping up vegetables. I think she was making chili, and she was thinking, you know, did they catch anything in your house soon? Will we be back? And if, you know, it would be done on time. And so it's almost like I had to check in with her before I left, kind of thing. My mom and I were really close. And the next thing I remember, I was literally in this white space. It seemed to have like these rolling clouds, so to speak. I knew there was somebody on the left of me. Like I didn't see a body for myself or this being. I just sensed there was an energy there that had brought me to this point. And I remember like consciously being aware that there was this light in front of me, that it was like blinding if you were in the physical body. Like you'd feel like staring at the sun, right? And you'd be seeing spots forever, you know. So it was almost like, you know, like I still had like the human consciousness reaction of, it's so bright, can I look at it, you know, and to take that energy in. And there was this white light that turned to like a bright yellow, then like an amber, and then like an orange. But it like took up my whole entire vision in that sense. But I could sense behind it there was like a doorway or like a gateway or a portal. Like I could just make it out. Like there was something behind it, and it was above me, almost like there were steps. Like, because I knew I was looking up. Like I felt like I was really tiny compared to this experience and this space. And then I could see like the outline of a being come forward within it, within this light. And then I have some memory, you know, of there was this whole long conversation. I can't, you know, and none of it, you know, things have trickled back in, but it's not something I can just like pull what it was, other than the fact that they wanted me to return. They were saying I hadn't done enough yet. I need to return. And what felt like an eternity was this argument that there's no way they could make me return to what I had seen. I don't remember what I had seen, but I'm like, I'm not going back to that. And so there was this whole thing, and it went back and forth. It felt telepathically almost, but then like it was almost like an external voice. All of a sudden, this big booming male voice was like, "You must go back. You have more to do." And it was one of those voices that like you don't argue with. It's like your dad on high going, "No." You know, like, no more, you sassy little kid, get your booty back in your body kind of sensation. And so I was like, and I still argued. I'm so sassy. And like, no, you know. So then I'm like, fine, you know. So literally there was this like fine, like a 7-year-old kid would be, right? About getting back in my body. And so then it's kind of like I was at my body and seeing my body, and they had drug it out and laid it on its side in the grass up on top that embankment I spoke of on the side, but there was no ill effects. There was no water in my lungs. But I wasn't like rousing, because I literally kept going in and out and going, I know you want me to be in here, but I don't want to go in here. I'm at least with my body, you know. It's like, no. And so I remember feeling that way for almost like a year after. Like I was there, but I wasn't like locked in there. Like, I'll be with my body if you make me, kind of in being sassy that way. And then they said I didn't talk, I think, till the next day. Like I was just kind of in this weird, almost, you know, where my body was moving and doing things, but I wasn't engaged. So the next day, they said, I recall having a conversation. I came downstairs for the morning, and I said to my brother, I said, why did you think you could swim or run to me and try to save me? That makes no sense. And he just went white. He's like, what? And I said, well, I heard everything that happened. And he's like, what? And I told then my mom came in, and I'm like, I know I died. And my family had lots of experiences. So we lived in a very rural area, but very active. Like they thought they had ghosts and various things. And we had Sasquatch encounters. So my family, like, and my dad could see like spirits. So they kind of took it in stride. They're like, okay, you know, yeah, something must have happened to you if you knew what your brother was saying and where I was, because then I told her about being in the kitchen. So from that, you know, experience, then I started to have all these clair abilities and like psychic intuitive dreams and sense energy. So then they definitely knew, obviously, that something must have happened to me. So my mother was always kind of my advocate. She would kind of be the funnel, because I'm this little kid trying to tell people this and that's going to happen, or something is wrong, you know, or I sense something in your energy, go to the doctor, you know, things like that. So often till I was, you know, in my teens, she'd be that filter, say, oh, you know, I got a feeling, she'd say, or maybe you should just go to do this, she'd give advice. As I got older, she would say, Lori said this, and so then, people started to be aware, the more things would happen that I would be able to know things I should know. And, but the key with some of that I want to share is, Spirit has told me numerous times about respecting sovereignty of what somebody's creating. So even though I knew like something was medically wrong with people, or like before people would pass, they would look like these wax dummies, almost like their energy, their soul essence was starting to leave. It was always like 2 weeks before they would pass. Even though I knew things or these type of things, you couldn't always prevent it. And as a kid, that was really hard because I took it on myself as like, did I cause that? Did something happen? So it was very complicated to integrate my new sense of reality. And it kind of made it really difficult to connect because I was always like, when I could see these things about people. So I asked Spirit for a time, like, I don't want to see these things. This is too much for a young child. But when I was very young during this time, I think it was probably about 10 that I had my first encounter with another being that was disincarnate. I believed it to be alien. I had this experience where I was like out of body, or either that or I was wandering in body, which I'd been known to do in my sleep. Like they would find me odd places. But I was talking to this being, and this being said to me, we had this whole long talk. Some of it has come back to me now. This is weird how they block some of these things out, but it was basically about why I chose to incarnate here, what I was supposed to be doing, who I really was. And one of the things that they said to me was, your parents are really alien. And as a kid, I did not know what that meant because, this is the 80s. So it was like Invasion of the Body Snatchers was coming out and all these different things. I thought like, oh no, my parents are aliens. They stole my parents. I mean, I was all like, ah. So like for like a week, I like, the side eye to my parents. Like I was living like, oh my God, they're going to take me next. This is a kid. So I thought like, yeah, oh, they're going to, yeah. So, but during beyond quantum hypnosis, I recalled some of these things, and it was interesting because when asked who that being was, I said the Father, and then they asked whose Father, what Father, and I said the All Father, the Father of all that is. And later, my husband's like, you do realize, they refer to Odin as the All Father. He's like, maybe that's your pantheon, so to speak, and so that was really interesting. There was other things where, as far as that, like, and I had this one validated, and I know it sounds a little wild, but when I was about same thing, 10 to 12, I have a memory of me and my mother standing in the front yard, looking at the sky, and it was almost like the sky opened up, and there was this football field sized craft above our area and where the quarries are. And then there was these light discs coming out of it that were like smaller ships. And then knowingly now, but back then they didn't supposedly exist, there was these stealth fighter jets like trying to fight with this ship. And I remember saying to my mom, are they going to make us forget again or just kill us this time? And I don't mean the aliens making me forget, okay? They're pretty benevolent. But I recall this, and the interesting thing is, I had a friend validate it because he was the township police, and him and his partner got called to a possible UFO undescribed sighting over a quarry about a mile up the road during that same time period. And he said that when they got to the quarry, the ship was visible, but then it cloaked almost like, Wonder Woman's jet, like it was shimmery like that. You could still see that same, and he said it was a football size. We had the same description of this craft. over that. And he's like, there's no way we could report it. We'd lose our job or be killed or something. He's like, we both decided, nope, we didn't see nothing. We're not nothing. And I speak of this now because he has since passed, God bless his soul. And he was a very good man. But he wanted me to know. He didn't want, obviously to talk about it publicly, but he's like, you're not crazy. I saw the same thing. So that's really also an interesting memory, because I know some people are, and even PMH Atwater is doing research right now on the connection with NDE, young NDEs and UFOs. So that was one of mine. And then later, all this stuff happened between like 10 and 12, I want to say. When I was 12, I had a Sasquatch encounter. My dad and myself were in the kitchen. It was late at night, and there was this huge pounding near the roof of the side of our house on the walls. And my dad looked out the window, and I was hiding by then because of the noise. And he's like, yeah, it's them. He's like, just stay there, be quiet. So move on. We didn't know what to think, and so that's what we did. And then the next morning we went out, and there was these 2 sets of giant footprints, like they show a Bigfoot literally there. So then I'm like, oh, my dad's not so crazy. It was Bigfoot. And they prefer Sasquatch, but back then we called it Bigfoot. And so that was interesting. And then the more I've learned about them being interdimensional beings, the more I understood, like, these big orbs we used to see were their energy. And there was like this one incident where my brothers tried to go trapping, and they had set all these traps around our property. Well, something that night literally snapped the trees over, which I've seen it since, it's classic of Sasquatch, of how it was way too up high for bear or anything else. And they do this weird snap where they aim it towards the road. Yeah, they did that to all my brothers' traps. So yeah, my brothers never trapped after that. I think they served their purpose. But yeah, so, and there were some other events that I understand now. And before I leave this space of that property, I had this mystical experience with an indigenous elder. My husband and I make jewelry and various things like that. And we happened to get picked, which still doesn't make sense, like divine intervention. We were the only like non-indigenous people, nor did our stuff really fit, that actually got selected to sell things at this powwow. Well, this elder that looked like, how is he even walking, came up to me, and he said, he's just like, hold these. And he had like these 5, not so shiny, they weren't Apache tears, that they were these 5 black small stones. I'm like, okay, I wasn't familiar with any of their practices or the things they did at that time. And so I held them, and he's like, And then he said, he spoke in riddles. He said these things that, like I said, again, don't remember exactly what he said, because it was like, it wasn't absorbing. It didn't make sense to me. It was like riddled. And then he checked my husband as well. And then he's like, And then he walked around the front side of our tent. And all of a sudden he's like, our people know of this area. He's like, and he described where it was. And he's like, there's a large paranormal vortex there. And he said, and it's been with our people, or our people's knowledge, that type of conversation. And then I'm like, I just like froze in my mouth dropped, because it was literally our property. And my grandpa used to find a lot of arrowheads, so this makes sense to me. And I was like, that's my property. I said, that's where I grew up, which was over an hour away. There's no way this man knew it. And he just gives me this weird side glance, like that knowing. And he's like, And then he literally walked a few steps, and we couldn't find him anymore. We tried to find him. We asked people. He was there and gone. We didn't see him approach, didn't see him leave. But I understand that now, of why there was so much activity there, and the things that happened to me, because there was such an energy. I guess there was like a lot of ley lines and things that ran through that property. It had a lot of energy. I won't get into all what we thought were ghost stories of things being moved or things happening. There was a lot of mystical experiences. I was once, my friend was silly enough to bring over a Ouija board. And obviously kids, they don't know, the respect for those anyway as a portal. But there was this weird being that kept coming through, and it kept saying that it wanted to connect with my brother. My brother was his. It was really weird. But that night we went to bed, and at like 3:30 in the morning, something woke both me and my brother up. There was this huge light and mist that reminded me of my near-death experience that came under the door, and the mist was just flowing, and it woke both me and my brother up, because the next morning we were both like, it was at 3 something. My mom's like, you are never bringing anything like that in this house again. She was so upset. She was like, no, you stupid kids, the motherly stuff. Yeah, so that taught me to have great respect for these type of things. So being that, it makes sense because of all the availability in that area of these type of occurrences. And then from there, let's see, in my 20s, I went on to go to school for a medical assistant. And during that, I had some experiences with medical intuitive. I've later found that's what they call it, where I just knew things about patients. I recall this one girl who came in. She was only 5, so you wouldn't expect it. And I did all her triage type stuff. It was in an urgent care, and literally she didn't really present like I should have known this. And I walked out of the room, and I said to the doctor on call that I said, it's her appendix. And he looked at me, he's just like, yeah, no, because it's not normal for that age of a child. And he went in there. He was in there less than 5 minutes, comes out once again, white as a ghost with his mouth down. He's like, how did you know that? I would have missed that if you hadn't said something. And he sent her up to the ER. And this is kind of an ego lesson on lots of levels, because that ER was contracted doctors. So they were a rival contract company to our urgent care. So they often dismissed our diagnoses. Well, this little girl, they said she had a tummy ache and sent her home. Within hours, her appendix burst, and they luckily got her back in surgery, and she healed. But I felt like that whole incident was a spirit lesson, for all of us involved, because they let their ego come first, and he did as well, initially. So it's kind of interesting how spirit likes to teach us things. And I was given understanding later, that was what she designed that whole thing to be a tool, right? On a lot of levels. And I had, let's see, one other instance in between there where I had an experience where I was slightly awake, but not awake. It was more like in a meditative theta stage. And I had this whole thing of this being that came to me. I say being because he didn't have a body, but he looked like a young man. And he was showing me that like these portals, like life between life, like, and he showed it as a coffin. And then when you look in the coffin, there was a portal to like the next timeline and the next timeline and the next timeline. And he literally told me, like, you can't tell anybody about this now. He's like, I wasn't supposed to show you this. You're not supposed to know this. So for years, I don't even normally speak of that one, but it comes into play in some of my later understandings. It's like spirit kind of builds these things all up. They give you a little bit that you can digest, right? So moving forward, I got with my husband. I knew him since we were 4 years old. But we got back together about 23, and we got married at 28. And we had tried to have children, and we were not able to. And I had finally gotten pregnant. And I, like 5 weeks, and this is the weird thing about my gifts. Like, I knew I was pregnant before the doctor's like, no way you can be. Each time I was pregnant, I knew like within a week. And I would go in, and he's like, no. And he's like, well, we'll just do a test. So it got where he trusted me by the third one. But anyway, so I did hear the heartbeat and everything. But then I had a visitation from my deceased grandmother, and she came to me and she showed me sitting in the clinic of my OB, and she was like, this baby is not yours to keep, she said to me. She's like, there will be more, don't be afraid, but like this has to happen, kind of thing. And then she showed me the date on a calendar. Also, there's a big calendar in front of me. And well, on that day, I was in extreme pain, and I was spotting heavily. And so they took me to the ER, my husband and my mother. And so they determined I needed an emergency D&C. Well, because it was an emergency, they didn't know much about me. They didn't take anything or know that I had sensitivities, or at that time we didn't know I was anemic. So what happened is I started bleeding out, and then I quit breathing because they gave me too much anesthesia. So then they intubated me, excuse me, not incubated. They intubated me. And during this whole thing, I know the next day, I had the same sensation of my first NDE, and I was at peace. Like, I knew this had to happen. My understanding that they gave me was I went home for healing so I could have these children, which I also was given a whole vision of having this child when I was 20, my first child, and that like he'd be different and he'd have gifts, and that, because at that time I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to have children. I wanted to live in a cabin in the woods like a hermit. I wanted nothing to do. That was my first thing coming back from my NDE as a child. And I told my mom, that was my whole goal that whole time until that vision. Anyway, so what they told me was that my body was not forming a child properly. Okay, so that coincided with what Spirit told me, like it's to help you have children. But there was something that my body didn't know how to make a baby. This baby's organs and systems were not interconnected at all. And it's interesting of note that, I named her Lydia Rose, and my daughters have experienced her in the astral or other timelines that, where she lived, and I didn't have my son. So I find that very interesting. So, and I've sensed her energy as well, but she did that so that, that was the arrangement that she had made so that she could experience being in a body. And, but just to get like her feet wet. So it was kind of this whole spiritual arrangement so that I could go on to have these children. And my son indeed was born. They did a lot of what do they call them? Prenatal scans and stuff. And so he had an extremely large one side of his brain. So they said he's either going to be a genius or he's going to have issues. Well, he's kind of both. But we didn't realize as a child until this other experience, an after-death communication. My mother had died about two weeks before this incident or so. It was an arrangement she made with my husband. My husband is very smart and studied many religions, and he's had some spiritual experiences, but he was kind of a doubter, right? Even though he knew what happened to me. And so him and my mom had this arrangement that she would send this symbol for him if there was an afterlife. Well, here's my son at 2.5. I was getting home when this happened. He was up on the landing. And it's of note, my son had to have birth to 3 and other things because he was delayed cognitively, and his OT, because his hands and stuff, he couldn't hold or write or any of these things. And he was only 2.5, I think, I want to say he was 2.5, almost 3 at this point, but he wasn't speaking, he wasn't moving properly, all of these things. So we had never heard him speak. So he was speaking to somebody on the landing. So my husband was freaking out and went running up there. And there's my son on the landing with a purple crayon, my mother's favorite color, drawing this. And this is how you will know how spirit moves, because it was the Japanese symbol for life. That's not an easy symbol to draw. And he drew it perfectly on the landing. And that's right when I got home and my husband was white and screaming. Because it totally conflicted his whole reality, how that could happen, right? But after this, my son was this conversation he was having with my mother, he was all of a sudden verbal. And he grew by leaps and bounds. But we figured out once he could talk that he was telepathic. He couldn't hear. I mean, he thought everybody communicated like spirit, like you just knew by reading that energy in those thought forms. So then his teachers and stuff, like I said, he was in pre-birth programs. We figured this out because he would literally say or know what they were feeling or thinking. And they called us into the office like, Miss Ellis, there's something different about your son, and he's this and that. And it's kind of, it wasn't disturbing, but the teachers, it kind of unsettled them. Like, how does he know this? It was, again, messing with their idea of reality, right? So needless to say, my life has kind of been filled with a lot of these weird experiences. And so my third death experience was in this same place. We had moved to Walworth, Wisconsin by then. Right outside Walworth, Wisconsin. And my third death experience takes place there. I was in the living room. I think my daughter was sitting in a chair, or my husband was talking to her. And I walked into the room, so he went to talk to me, and this event happened that I lost blood flow to my brain, is how we come to understand it. And I started to get like a tunnel vision. And I felt like I was going to black out, and I did. But they said my body still walked back like 5 or 6 feet. It just kind of stumbling back. And then it fell against the door jamb, and I hit my head and seizured. And he said that and then I was getting slumped over by the time he got back to me, and I wasn't breathing. And so it's as soon as this whole thing happened simultaneously, I was in this place, with the white mist again. But this place was a little different. And I was sitting on this marble bench in this garden park setting, but it was still misty. It's like I couldn't see farther out. In my memory, I just remember this park bench. And I was sitting on it with my mother. But it was a being trying to, looking like my mother. And I'm like, but I had the knowing, I'm like, that's not her energy. And the being telepathically was like, well, it was just to calm you so you feel safe. And so you didn't react. They were just trying to keep me calm. And I'm like, no, you're not my mom, kind of thing. And then she calmed me down, just saying it was for my benefit. And this is the only time in my experiences that I recall having a form, so I saw her just kind of tapping my leg going, it's okay, and we were sitting there. The conversation that we had was, they said, you have done enough now, you can stay if you wish, we'll give you time to think about it. And I was instantly like, no, I need to get back to my daughter, because I knew she was in the room and how that would have freaked her out and everything else. I'm like, no. But during this, I remembered and had it kind of validated of this other life. I call them other lives, but past life, where I was this man, and it looked like 1800s, England, it was the cobblestone streets. And I was a cobbler. My shop was on one side of this bridge, and my house was 2 houses after the bridge, which is interesting, but that's where the town was. And then kind of where the shops were, and then everybody lived on the other side of the bridge, kind of thing. And I was making my way home after closing up. So it was twilight, it was kind of dark. And these 2 men approached looking kind of beggarish, right? And they tried to rob me. The one closest to me had one of those handheld musket type things, where they shoot the balls. And so how hair triggered those were in those days. If you know anything about guns, it was just a little flintlock, and musket powder. So what happened is they asked me for my coin purse, and I remember taking that out and handing it to them. But then the other one wanted my pocket watch and other stuff, where his accomplice, whatever you want to call him, was trying to pull him away, going, "We got it, let's go," and because he jerked on him, he pulled his hand, and that the gun went off, and it shot me right under the right ribs. And then they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that," and they're going back and forth. And the other guy's like, he's like, we gotta go, obviously he shot him. So they took off running down back into there. And I just remember being shown, like, me making my way home. And I went into my cottage, and it was my wife and my daughter. And I collapsed into her arms, and I died. I remember saying something like, "I love you, I'm so sorry." But this is how it plays in. That was my same daughter in that lifetime, that energy, that soul consciousness with my same daughter. And so I had died on her at the same age that I would have been dying on her now. And I was like, I can't do that to her again, and my daughter does have memories of me dying, and that they had to live and scrape, and they ended up on the wharf, trying to make their way and on ships and different things, and how like traumatic it was, because they had to like fight to find food and everything else, because in those days, I would have been the only breadwinner, the person to bring in money. So because I don't know if it was simultaneous or what, but that was a loving choice. So, I had made a loving choice. So that kind of balanced that energetically. And also, I found that forgiveness for those gentlemen, because I understood it wasn't their intention. I could see it from that 360 view. And another reason I'm bringing this up is I had a pain in my right side since the time in that spot in this lifetime. Since I was very, very young. My mom took me to specialists, test after test. They couldn't find anything. And after this incident and that forgiveness, that pain and that problem went away. I used to almost collapse as a kid. It was so painful. Anyway, so it's finding those healings. From my understanding, and even the healing work I do, so much of the timeline things bleed through, or the cell memory and the soul memory, to be healed. I'm trying. The next thing I think that was significant in this whole myriad of experiences of my life was in 2019. I had what I call this. By then I had moved to Missouri, which is interesting as well, because it was on my mother's deathbed. She had told me this whole vision she had of this property and being there, and that like something was majorly going on in the world at that time, and that I needed to be in there, and I needed to open my home to like my family and other people and all of these things. And she described this house, and this house like sat empty like 5 years. Numerous people put bids, tried to get it, everything. And I just happened to see it online. I made an offer and it was mine. So the neighbors were just like, "How did you get this? We've all tried," So it's kind of really cool that way, that it all lined up. And it was exactly the one that she described, and that I had kind of like a co-vision with her I had seen. And our house in back in Wisconsin literally looked almost like a mirror image. So the driveway was backwards, but it was the same color and not as big. So I was probably drawn to that property because it looked like the one in the vision. But this one, the driveway is the right way and everything else. So, and I have a psychic medium friend who was like, "You were meant to be in this property. It has something to do with the energetic lines again. And there's a huge private lake behind me," which Pisces and being a healer, I was told, you really need those large masses of water to be able to. So coming here, all of us we had this feeling of we're home. Like we already knew places, people, and different things that were going on. So I know we were meant to be here. But that's when even my whole family and myself started to have way more spiritually transformative events. But the major one, like I said, was 2019. To get back to that, I was starting to hear these things, and it was from Yeshua. I mean, you told me to call him Yeshua. I knew him as Jesus because I was raised Catholic loosely. We weren't overly religious in that sense, because my mom didn't want to drag 5 kids to church. We weren't the best behaved. So it got where we went to church less and less as far as that goes, just holidays, weddings, things like that. So I knew him as Jesus, but he's like Yeshua, and and just telling me different things that there's no way I could know. And that happened like the week before this incident. And then I felt like I was losing myself. I didn't know what was going on. And all of a sudden, my husband and I were in the kitchen, and I'm like, I have to go ground. I don't know why, but I need to be out in nature. I got to go outside. And so I went outside, and as soon as I stepped out, all these like information and things started flooding to me. And then I went to the side of our yard, and in front of me, I call this experience like the connection to one Christ consciousness, because all of a sudden they showed me how Earth was this thought form and how it came into being and into physical matter, and all the decisions and the things and the energies that were put into it that brought us to where we were now. By that point, I'm bawling and begging for forgiveness. I'm like, I'm so sorry, I forgot. I was supposed to do this. And they're like, and all of these things, because I could feel like the whole collective and how everything had manifested, is the word I like to use, into this physical matter, and where we took it with our free will. And I was kind of being shown, paradise is always here. It's always been here. It's just a frequency difference, and, aligning with this frequency and all of these things. But from there, things changed for me exponentially, as far as like a lot of my abilities and different things expanded some more, or came back. Like some of them had faded and gone back, or I'd asked not to have them. And so it was really interesting, because I was so distraught, and I'm out there crying, and there's these 4 huge trees. I say 3 because one's kind of half formed, that like were in front of me, and it's almost like they were talking to me and giving me more information during this experience. So now, since I called them the Sentinels, they sit at the end of my driveway. And I was in the middle of this road having this whole mystical experience. Thank goodness no cars came, right? Because here I am going, what is going on? And they're showing me all these things. And so then I started walking back in my driveway, and they're showing me all these things. And that's when I was like, I got my place in the world, I guess, and my purpose. And it was very moving, but I also like had this whole connectionness with the land. And now I understand it, but then I didn't, because all of a sudden I was standing facing out towards this lake, and I sang this song. It felt like a healing thing, but also like a protection thing, in some language I don't recognize. It sort of sounds like, is it the native Norway tribe, and sort of sounded like that, but now I've kind of known it as more like light language. And I must have sang for like 5 minutes, and then I did this like powerful like hand gesture, and then shoot, and the whole incident and the energy just like faded away, like it was rolling away. And after that, I told my family what happened. But it was interesting. I walked back in the house after that, and my daughter, 'cause she's energy sensitive, she goes to me, "Who are you?" She's like, "Your energy totally changed. You're not my mom. Who are you?" And like literally, she said it. And that's my 20-year-old daughter, my oldest daughter. And yeah, so she's like, "Mom, I felt it." And I understood that I had integrated like a higher aspect of myself during that whole thing. And from there, like I said, I started having all these visions and mediumship, and just knowing things. It just kept coming to me and changing as it went. Um, and I just had a hard time integrating some of these experiences. But in this 2019 experience, this is where they gave me the whole thing that I needed to start speaking my truth in about all these different experiences, because it ties it all together. And they said that, like, my voice carries light codes, or had the frequency that could heal or make people aware in that sense. And so they're like, you need to start speaking your truth. They showed me speaking in front of people. You have to remember, to this point, I really enjoyed being a hermit. I didn't have any outside interaction. I was just me, my family, and that's good. And so I wasn't ready yet. I knew my family certainly wasn't ready for me to put myself out there. So as this things progressed, 2021 is my fourth death experience, and I still wasn't doing what they told me to do. And so that kind of leads into it. So in 2021, it was about a month before I started having some autonomic nervous system issues where I would like literally freeze up and seem almost catatonic, or I all of a sudden couldn't swallow, or I'd forget to breathe, or I couldn't turn my head, some weird things for about a month before. But it really increased like the week before this incident. What happened was I became aware in outside of my body, because I think often, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm usually in the quantum or the astral, right? A lot. And so my awareness is that I was already there when this happened, or that's just my memory that I went straight there. But I'd stopped breathing in my sleep. And my memory is being in this space again, this white space. But this time there wasn't really clouds. It was just like this white space of all pure light. And in front of me was what I've come to know, and people have told me is my twin fractal. I met him about 15 years ago, and he was standing in front of me. My friend I made once I moved here was here. So they appeared as their physical form, just like a more healed, younger version. So she was off to this side, to the right of me. And I sensed my husband's energy, and I saw him and my daughter, that daughter, the 20-year-old one, off to the left side. But behind them was like hundreds of like these light beings. I guess most people refer to them as, they looked almost see-through, but they had the iridescence like a bubble, and they were just like going out and out behind them. And so this is another spirit time is still simultaneously, so forgive if I jump all over, but the being that appeared as my friend said to me, if you want that body, you have to get back in it now. Meanwhile, my consciousness was having this whole conversation with the being in front of me that was my twin fractal, but he seemed very authoritative. And he was telling me, and this is the understanding, so bear with me. He's like, at your level of light, you have to be mindful of your words, your thoughts, and what you are creating. Because I had inadvertently, well, not inadvertently, but I thought it was being funny. It's one of the largest NDE groups on Facebook. Somebody had posted a meme on lame ways we died, just to make light of it, right? To have a laugh. Well, a lot of people started posting of, I want to go this way next time, Well, I told the joke of, I want to go like grandpa, not screaming like the rest of the passengers in his car. I wanted to go in my sleep. Yeah, not even a week after I did that, this incident happened. Yeah, so hello. Yeah, and then the hard way. So I got all these downloads about how to manifest and how things come to be and present themselves, thoughts with intention. But everything is created from emotion. So if you're emotionally attached to those thoughts, that's when it plays out somewhere, sometime. Like I was showing, even if it doesn't play out in this timeline of me, it'll play out in the other timeline of me. I've seen these timelines. I'm jumping ahead because that's after this. But so what happened was, she was telling me to get back in my body. I was like, how do I get in my body? And she's like, and I literally referred to it as a vehicle. I said, how do I get back in my vehicle? And she's like, you need to swallow. And she was showing me how. And so I swallowed. And as soon as I did, then I took this huge gasp, like, and I kind of lurched forward. And as soon as I took that gasp, it was like a horse kicked me in the chest. As my heart like kicked in, it literally felt like a horse kick. And then they're like, now search your energy. Can you feel your body? And I'm like, I can't feel anything. They called it a systems check, literally. So I was like, okay, and they're like, scan from your feet up. So as I was doing that and trying to move this energy, it was like, your arm fell asleep times like 10,000. It went through my whole body, that prickly. It was more painful than my 27 hours of labor of said son, only for an instant, but it was like, I can't even describe it for just that instant. But then for like 20 minutes afterwards, that when I was like fully into my body, I shook. And from my medical training, it was pretty much like I was in shock. I was shaking and cold and just sitting there, like literally felt like I was vibrating, like the bed was moving. It was so intense, right? And then I'm like, what the heck just happened to me? You know, I'm like, that wasn't no dream, you know, I know that, you know, it's something, you know, and just because of all my other instances, but I didn't want to accept it. I'm very analytical for that. I've had so many of these experiences. And so I was like, what happened? What went on? But my twin fractal contacted me the next day because he's always been very aware of my energy. And he's like, what happened to you last night? He's like, something major happened to you. I know it because you did this weird thing where you came to me in like that space and you said, I needed to drink of your body. And it's interesting because I've heard that in different experiences before. It was some weird test. He's like, you tested me. He's like, and I'm like, well, I think that validated that, you know, that happened. And the girl that told me to get back in my body called me the next day. And she's like, I had a dream. I was standing over you. She's like, and you were dead in your bed. She's like, what happened? You know, so it was kind of almost like a shared death, you know. But after that experience, they were, you know, like, you need to start speaking your truth. That's the reason. And I remember when they said to get back into your body, you know, if you want that body, get back in it. I said to them, I said, I've lived too many lifetimes and done too much work to get to this space of what's going to happen. Get me back in that body now, because they had showed me, and in these different experiences, I knew this whole energetic shift was going to be taking place. And I'm like, I'm not missing that. I've spent too much time and too much work to, you know, to see what's coming, is literally what I said to her. And since then, you know, and after various experiences, you know, I started seeing like the energy grids. I had an experience where there was this blue energy grid. It was like the squared grid. And I saw versions of me at every intersection going out into infinity. And they told me, you know, this is you and all these different incarnations of yourself going out infinitely. Like there is no wrong choice because you're making different choices in each of those, going all out into infinity. And then I had other ones where I kept seeing these grids. I even saw, which is weird, in real time, I wasn't dreaming, it wasn't anything. I literally saw the grid like they show in the Matrix, you know, with numbers and letters falling down. I forget at that time, but there was a word it spelled out, and it had to do with something else that was going on, but it actually spelled out a word. Other times I'll just see like a lit up word on the wall, or and I've seen like the honeycomb grid, and there's and I've seen, well, the new grid coming in is violet. The healed grid is violet that's coming in. But I had this long understanding and this experience of knowing that I came in as a grid, what they called a grid architect, because about 2 months ago, 2 months ago now, I had this experience that was kind of like more in your waking, but more like a meditative state that I haven't told the full story, but what happened was they showed like a version of me in a hospital bed, and the being was off to the left of it and with its back towards me. And there was this discussion of what was going on and why this was going on. And I understood it was like another timeline, but this being was saying that it's like, I'm trying to scramble for words, but basically it gave me the understanding that like, that it was my higher fractal, and that, you know, it had these abilities and things that, you know, they were trying to activate, and that it said to me, you asked for this. I'm like, no, I'm dealing with too much right now. I don't need any more changes. And they're like, no, you asked for this. You need this right now. Here it is. She was very, very, very sassy, to be honest. And she said that, all of a sudden like a portal opened and this violet Merkaba came through, and I felt this huge thing of energy like literally merge with myself, and my body kind of like froze for a second as this energy came through. And it was really intense, and there was a shift. And as soon as that energy did that with me, then I was able to see her full form. And she said she was the divine feminine. She said her name was, she introduced herself as like Aya Ra, but she was in violet and red, and she had these huge wings going out. And she was wearing like a headdress and this gold and this whole red, but she seemed like living energy. And she's, and she like did a blessing, and then like she faded away. But since that, I've had other experiences, and prior to that, I had a beyond quantum hypnosis technique. And in that hypnosis technique, I kept talking about source code, and that source code put itself back into the matrix to literally heal it. A lot of the verbiage that they've all given me is very technical and matrix like, but that's just how they present it to me. But I was also given the understanding of that there is a mystic magical thing, as well as the technical aspects of how everything is created. And so from that, I started having all these weird kind of changes. Like I could sense more of energies. I could see their fractals. I could see like where they incarnated from, and I could open these portals and vortexes to do this energetic work. And so when I do that work, it's really interesting. It kind of, it took me by surprise at first, is that when I started working with people, I could see what I call their divine portal. Like, how they say the temple is within you, everything's within to heal. I could see these portals. I call them the God portal. And it's like where the heart chakra is sort of, but a little bit below. And I would see this whole portal open, and you would either I could see universes in some, nebulas in others, like a star system, and sometimes I could see sun. And so my understanding was going forward that these were like their God portal, like how they connect to their source, their incarnations. And so when I did that work, I would see these beings, like when I walked them through their incarnations, what I call their soul cloud. I call it soul cloud as far as what I do, because what I was given the understanding is there's all of these personality complexes that make up this cloud of souls that we tap into. Like we are the energetic channel, like the physical embodiment that locks them to this earth grid frequency. But we can call on different aspects depending upon like what we're trying to work on and develop. So and I saw this a lot without realizing it, like when somebody's personality suddenly changes, or they suddenly have likes or dislikes that they didn't have before, because sometimes it's that energy interweaving with them, to do these things. So it just really broadened my whole understanding of the universe and how things happen. But when I walk some of these back in this energetic vortexes, I could see like who their source fractal was. Like in different ones, I've seen, like, I've literally seen the Magdalene. I've seen like some consciousnesses I've come to understand were like from outside of our particular grid universe that like came to what people call answer Gaia's call. And they would look like these blue fluid light bodies, like with these like domed heads that kind of come to a point, and their fingers almost could be solid, or they could like tentacle out. I mean, I've seen all sorts of various beings doing what I do now, and connecting with them, and they were very playful. Or they talk about how each person, like, oh, that aspect is for me. They get that silliness for me, or they get that talent for me. They always wanted to say like, that's for me, or that's what I taught them, you know? And so it's really cool because it literally like connects those two consciousnesses. And so I connect to that conscious, and then I try to connect people to that conscious, you know, like I'm the portal conduit, you know, because I have an understanding going forward. And from my own experiences, I know I didn't get into a lot of those because there's so much I could share, but of being this multidimensional being, they have shown me that that's kind of what it means. Like, I know a lot of people talk about like ascension, but it's more that you are not locked into one physical perspective. Like, you can choose to look at different ones, or different timelines. From my understanding, Spirit has shown me that like we each create our own timeline, and by energetic agreements, it weaves in and out. Like, when I asked them about it, they tried to show me, they like to give me pictures. I'm very photographic memory, so they like to give me pictures. And they said it's like a color form sheet. You know how you all start with the same background on the color form sheet? You see, like, so Earth is our color form background, right? And what we add into it, what people we stick on that thing, and the things that we do are each kind of individual. I always laugh because they always give me the example that like, you saw a blue shirt, but to me it's pink. Neither one of these wrong. You're just experiencing your reality just a little differently, right? But it's still a shirt or a shoe, you know, it's still the same, but each person experiences that energy just a hair differently. But so from all of that, I've come to understand that the work going forward is, you know, connecting in that consciousness, because the original, what I call incarnation wound or PTSD, is being all that is and being connected to all this consciousness. And then all of a sudden you're in this itty bitty body thinking you're abandoned, you're separated from source, and you're only this itty bitty being. And in order to heal that and heal what I call the earth grid is to reconnect that the light bodies, the dormant DNA of all the things that we have been or are, in order to do this healing, you know, and that comes into play energetically with a lot of different things, for how we interact with our environment. Like, and not everybody may see it this way, but to me, everything has soul energy. Everything is alive and a part of us, and we're a part of it. And, you know, if you're able to pull your consciousness into that 360 view, you can see how everything intermeshes and plays out and has these agreements energetically. I had an incident, I want to say 2 years ago after we had moved here, that kind of proved this, because I asked Spirit, I'm like, every time my daughter's like, stop asking, because then something either happens to you or me. But I asked Spirit, you know, is this sense right? Is this message I'm getting correct? I said, you know, is life like a choose your own adventure book? So they had shown me like this accident. And in this accident, I saw the accident down the road, but my consciousness was more with the EMTs, you know how they block the road off way ahead of time? Well, I was with them, and they were saying, you're safe, you're fine. I'm like, no, we're not. I know the car exploded. I know I died. What are you talking about? I know that happened. And I was with my husband and said daughter, and they're like, no, that didn't, you know, you're safe. And I'm like, no, it didn't, you know, and it was a very disturbing thing, vision. So a week later, we're going down the same stretch of highway under this underpass where they had shown me this happen. And I hadn't told my daughter about it. This is, again, the 20-year-old. And we were coming right through there and down. And all of a sudden she's like, Mom, deer. She's like, I'm sensing deer. And she put up what she calls this light shield around the car. I'm like, but as soon as she got that, like, we both got it simultaneously. So we're looking for this deer. thinking we're going to hit the deer. And I'm thinking, oh, that's what causes that accident I saw, right? And so we go a little bit farther down the road, and we turn down the side road. And there in front of all three of us is this ghost deer. Like you could see the deer, but it was like holographic. And it was like this far above the road and went across. And I got a message with it, like, you know, like about being mindful, and that like I switched that timeline, like I didn't hit that deer and it went on to live, kind of thing. So that was quite a validation for, you know, because if you saw that by yourself, you'd be like, yeah, right, I'm either too tired or something else. But for all of us to see it, it was like, okay, thank you, spirit. All right, thanks for validating that one. You know, so, and there's been many instances like that since, you know, like I said, to the point my daughter's like, please, mom, don't ask for proof anymore. Just accept what they tell you. So, you know, I feel like I live a very multidimensional and metaphysical life, I guess, with what I do and experience and how I experience reality. And it's interesting because, you know, once we got here, my whole family as well, and it's almost like when you start to rise, you know how energy affects energy. So when I started to become more aware, so did my whole family start having remembrance. And this is significant in the fact that, like, that's why we noticed this a lot in the IANDS groups. When people start coming, they'll be like, oh, I only had this one experience and I never had anything else. Or I'm interested in them, but I've never had any spiritual experiences that I know of. Well, when they start hearing the stories and expanding their mind constructs, they start, literally, we've seen it many times, start having these experiences of their own. And then they're like, oh my God, because, you know, they're resonating with that, they're expanding their mind, but they're also exposing themselves to this higher light frequency, you know, that thing, you are who you surround yourself with, kind of thing, you know. And so I think as I connected more with these groups and different things, I expanded as well. And so that's why I volunteer for IANDS. I'm a facilitator for them. I also have IANDS Central Missouri, and I'm their social media coordinator. And I go to their production because IANDS puts out, as you've probably seen, lots of videos. So we work to try to keep these programs and everything going, and so everybody's aware of them. And I am just very, very blessed, I feel, to be a part of that and to contribute back to the community. And, you know, to be there for people who are just starting to have these experiences or trying to reintegrate, you know, reintegration work is part of something else I do. I have a healing ministry, and that's what I was talking about in my 2019 experience. They gave me the name, they said Spirit Sight, because they showed me how, you know, with Spirit Sight, what I call divine sight, you can see the truth in the world, like the energetic, what I call light codes, you know, in the words, like they show me that there's still, you know, like there's truth in every religion, there's truth in movies, there's all these things, and you just start to notice them, like synchronicities with divine sight. So that they gave me the name Spirit Sight, and that is my healing and teaching ministry. And it's kind of interesting because after I came back from my near-death experience at 7, I told my mom, I want to be a priest. And she's like, well, we're Catholic, women can't be priests. And I said, well, then that's not my religion. Nature's my church, and I'll stick with that till I find something. And it's kind of interesting because they told me I would be a priest. I mean, that's why I was so, what you call it, and full circle now, you know, as of like 2 years ago, I'm high priestess of Temple Sophia Unity Fellowship. And, you know, I'm a reverend of, you know, and a spiritual director of Spirit Sight. So I, you know, I guess I am doing my divine mission, I guess, purpose. And it was kind of interesting that, you know, they gave me all of that, and that I would be that. The other thing from that keeps coming up lately is they showed me and gave me the message to bring back at my 7-year-old experience, was that we are the caterpillars, you know, before they turn into a butterfly. Like we're that evolutionary thing in the human consciousness and expansion. And what's interesting about the butterfly is, you know, it starts how it starts, and then when it goes into that chrysalis, it literally dissolves its being, and it's essence and reforms its DNA into this butterfly, right? And so what they showed me about that was that's literally like what we're doing right now. We're going through these like DNA type upgrades and these reshifting of all of these things to be more connected to our source, and call, to me, source to source, I call it God, I call it this, you know, that what I call the prime creator energy, right? Because they showed me we're supposed to have this energetic circuit, like, you know how they say, oh, ground or do this. But for that new energy and for the earth to constantly, that's how the earth kind of got out of balance, so to speak, was we forgot how to make that connection, because as being these embodiments that anchor and are like the crystals on the grid, is that we stopped being the full circuit from source to the earth grid to source to the earth grid. Mostly now they even teach just to ground in. But from what they showed me going forward is that we are supposed to connect on both ends, so to speak, you know, between the central sun and the earth core energy to create this energetic circuit when we do our work. And they showed me that if, that's why there is a lot of what I call ungrounded outlets. You know, on a cellular level, if you're not pulling that energy in a full circle, you start to get dis-ease, you know, how people say that, but it trickles down. Anything energetically trickles down into the physical level, manifestation wise. That's even how we pull things in to create, is that those thought forms and then pulling them into physical reality. There's even some people who believe that's how the pyramids got there. I don't know, because they didn't give me that knowledge, but I know from family members who were able to either duplicate or pull in items, like literally manifest them from that quantum space, that is possible. That's kind of how we created the physical manifestation of the thought form of Earth. So if we're not doing so in a full healed cycle, we're not re-energizing that grid, that manifestation. So it starts to, you know, lose energy and break apart and create chaos and all of these other things we want to claim. My understanding from that is to not be careful what you feed your mind, is what they literally told me. You know, I haven't watched news, I think, since 2001 when I was carrying my son. I got that message. So maybe it was from him, but we didn't even own a TV after that, you know, because my understanding from that being in that void of creation was that whatever you think you create, and they showed me the chicken and the egg theory, like they were telling me in the now, they both exist now. So what you're feeding your mind, you're also creating simultaneously. So that's where they yelled at me about the mindfulness. So I talk a lot on that, but I've learned it the hard way in many instances. Like I love cats, and cats kept showing up, but I kept saying to my husband once we moved here, I'm like, oh, I really want an orange cat. I'd like an orange cat like Garfield. Well, my cat, a stray showed up, and she was pregnant, and she had all the litter died except for 2 orange tabbies. And then I'm like, oh, you know, I'm like, no, but I wanted a fluffy one. I'm like, I want a big and fluffy like Garfield. Not even a couple days later, literally one just like that showed up at my front door, and it was on its back feet knocking on the door. And this happened like 3 or 4 times with different cats, to the point my husband's like, okay, I can't deny that, even for you, you know, even for me, I'm not denying, that's just too distinct. It was all things I said. And he's like, you have to stop saying things like that. We don't need any more cats and cats showing up at the house. Even my vet teased me because he's like, there's something weird about you in that property, because all these weird animals nobody sees show up there, because I've had a bear, a mountain lion, bobcats, and like all these cats that I kept having to take to get spayed and neutered because they just kept showing up. So, you know, mindfulness is very key when, you know, you integrate that. And the other thing I just wanted to share before I wrap up and do some question and answers is that understanding of how we are creator beings. That's the truth for my reality. I don't claim it for anyone else, because this is the other thing Spirit taught me, that sovereignty. Nobody should claim your truth but you. Everything is within you, and that divine portal, everybody's divine portal so far has looked different to me. So it's whatever your creation is. I respect that. I'm just sharing my story, so maybe you can expand yours. My understanding of that is that different people are here different ways. Like I was saying before, there's some that are like source grid workers that, are here to fix the grid. My understanding, and from what I was given, is there's other consciousness, like I said, that answer the call of Gaia from other planets and things. And my youngest daughter has that memory. She had an experience with with these, what we call extraterrestrial, but beings. Her and my daughter together experienced it, where she was even told this, and that, like, why she came here. So there, I don't believe everybody's consciousness from my family's experiences is here the same. Like, some people may have a different source, and that's why they don't feel like they are an earth being. Like, they feel disconnected from the earth in that sense. Like, they don't feel like earth is home. Well, their source code, what I call source code, may not be of the earth source code, but they are here to, what I was told is, be like the battery to relight this grid. They're here to channel that energy, because many of those other existences live in a higher frequency. They don't have the duality we do. So they carry a lot more light energy. And that light energy is being used to heal what I call the earth grid. And so if we understand that, it kind of is almost healing, because it's like, why don't I feel like I belong? And you do belong in that sense. This is how I see it. And that, we each have a reason and a purpose. Some of it is just to experience the earth experience. Whatever your experience is here for you is yours. Create it however you want. I was shown that, we have so many expectations and conditionings, and those are going to fall away, because when we have expectations of another, we're kind of trespassing, because we're telling them, you're my mom, you're my brother, you're my boyfriend, you're my neighbor, you're supposed to act a certain way, like XYZ, because we have an idea of what a mom should be or dad should be, instead of seeing them as a being having an experience, and that they're just trying to make their own way. So there's a lot of healing in that understanding. Spirit showed me that, we come here also to get that 360 view. So that's why we have all these timelines, so we can learn and see things from every direction, because once you understand it, you know what you want to create. As the timelines converge and we recreate our realities, we are supposed to, like, choose what our favorite things were about Earth when we get to create. So, whatever your experiences is, just own it. They showed me the key thing is to be authentically you, speak in your authenticity. Don't dim it down. Don't try to manipulate yourself to fit in a certain idea of who you're supposed to be. We are limitless. And the more that we embrace who we are and each speak our truth, that's what they kept saying, is speak your truth. Because then you realize you're having your own experiences, or that you've had an experience, or that experience is available by speaking it, because our voice carries these light codes, all of ours carry these light codes and frequencies. You're handing a key to someone else. That's why you choose to meet different people. Because think about it, that kind of light energy you can't hold in one physical body. At least they showed me that. So each of us have a key to expand the other. Nobody meets by accident. Everything is a synchronistic attunement. And I could go on and on about those type of meetings where you literally know you met and you planned it, and you have this whole mystical moment when you meet someone, like, I know you, but I've never met you. Those are those moments, that we plan to exchange whatever it is. But I thank you for letting me speak today, and I'll just open it up to questions before I get into more and more stuff. But I hope you enjoyed a little bit of my tales, and maybe that they resonated with you.
Thank you so much, Loreli. It's wonderful to have you and hear your stories. You certainly have given a lot of information for thought and more intensive investigation. I'm sure a lot of you have questions. So I think the best way to do them is to put them in the chat. So then we can make sure everybody gets heard. So take a minute and think about what you would like to know from what she says. I appreciated what you were saying at the end. What I learned on the other side was that there is no one way to do anything. Anybody who says this is the way it's done, turn around and go the other direction, because they don't know what they're talking about.
It's unique to you. It's your creation.
That's
All of us are, and all of us are an intricate part of that. That's why embrace your uniqueness. The minute you copy anything or try to be like someone else, it's not authentic to you. You're not going to be in that divine flow.
right. Exactly.
Because you have to stay in that I call it heart-centered space, to be that unconditional love, to put it out into the world.
See, Arthur says, do you
I
do
can see the
reading
chat.
and remote?
Yes, I do. I think my website is in the newsletter. And I also have Spirit Sight with Mystic Moon on Facebook, or my name is Loreli Drache. You can message me through my professional profile on Facebook as well. I apologize, my website's half built, so it just says coming soon. I'm still working on that because there's a lot of information, and a lot of my healing abilities have expanded, especially in the last few months, and some integrations. It's enough that it surprises me even. So I want to incorporate all that. So I've had to kind of redo everything. So I hope that answers your question. And you can email me at info@lorelidrache.com, and I can send you like the whole list. I have a form of everything that I do that I can send you.
Maybe maybe you could put your website on the chat.
Yeah, I'll type those two things into the chat real quick for you.
Be great. Barbara says, thank you. Speak again on seeing these timelines. And
does she want me to talk a little bit more about that right now? Is that what she's asking?
would you like that?
Explain that
Barbara?
again, how you could see the different timelines of your existence.
Well, from what Source showed me is that any choice, people always freak out, like, what if I make the wrong choice? There is no right or wrong in spirit. It's just for the experience. And some people get upset about that. And I just mean, as far as we learn to make loving choices as we go, that's part of our expansion. But each choice and like every time when I do some of this work, if you haven't done any like healing work and integration work, they will literally take me through what ages your energy fractured, either in a good or shifted. And sometimes it's a positive way, but they show me where all your different energy shifts were. Because sometimes we have such attachment to our storyline that it is highly traumatizing to our soul, even because we're so attached to that storyline that we create this fracture, this fractalization of ourselves. And within each of those, it's kind of like how like you see the tree of life, there's all this fractalization, and thought forms. So let's say I want to experience a life where I'm a hermit and I live in that house that I wanted to in the woods. Well, in another one, I married my husband and I had my daughter lived in that, my daughters have seen that. There was one that I saw where I was looking through timelines trying to find my husband. So I saw all these different timelines. And some he was alone, some he was okay, but I could sense his loneliness. And other ones he was with like people that didn't really line up with him. And I remember in that timeline that, I kept trying to find a phone, like I needed to reach him. And this is where it gets interesting. In that timeline, I was trying to find a phone. And I finally got one to work. And I called him. I called his house where he was living with his parents in that timeline. And I spoke to his mom. And I made up some story that I was his ex-girlfriend and stuff, or maybe I even, from my experience, I might have been in her consciousness is what I'm saying. And I called and I asked him to make sure he was okay and how he was doing in life out of Zoom. Well, not long after that, my husband and I went to visit his mom, and she goes, "Hey, this old girlfriend you dated 10 years ago called to check on you with all the same stuff." And it wasn't until an experience I had recently, like I connected all that, and that they made me aware. See, this is all the things that you do, and how you're moving your consciousness through timelines. Um, so that was interesting. But yeah, I did see like 4 or 5 of his timelines, and with my own, like I said, I've just seen a few of where like I live different things and different things happen that I chose. And I'm
It's
not
kind of
I think-
frozen.
Did I freeze?
Diane, I think you're frozen. Everyone else is fine.
Okay,
Okay.
I just want to make sure. Okay. So that was my experience with timelines. And it's interesting in this way too, that as far as timeline switch, they showed me a timeline where I used to have one of those old Chevy 4-door Malibus, and I went to meet my 15-year-old boyfriend at the time, and he wanted to meet me down by the river under like the trestle area. So I pulled my car down alongside there. Well, in this reality, I was able to, here I didn't put the brake quite on. And so I had to jump back. I had to like basically catch the car, jump back in it and stop it. Well, in another lifetime, I got caught up in the seatbelt and pulled into with the car as it went into this, because it's the Fox River, and I think you guys know the Fox. It's pretty deep and it moves pretty fast, and my car got sucked into it and I drowned in that timeline. They showed me that timeline. So I understood that, because I kept wanting to know, like, why in this timeline do I keep recreating a pattern of, because all of my near-death experiences were lack of oxygen in some way, you know, every single one of them. Why am I recreating that pattern? You know, and some of that is these other timeline things and different things that I had to heal. And so I just thought that was interesting, because we don't realize how interconnected all of this stuff is, and how these like energetic bleeds through, I call them, happen. I hope I answered your question if you need to know anything more about that, but that's kind of my understanding of how these timelines work. Why they exist, I think, is to get that 360 view. Like while you're here, you get to live every choice you wanted to make, kind of thing, is my understanding. So, and I've been able to like pop into different consciousness to like experience it. And they showed me years ago, and now, because after that 7-year-old experience, I basically lived in deja vu. My youngest is that way right now. And they showed me that's when those timelines are meeting before you've had any splits. So each time those timelines kind of meet again, you have that deja vu points, because they're meeting up. Is there another question? I think there's more in there. Yeah. Oh, what is your take on love being primary?
Good. When my computer did whatever it did, it erased all the messages on my chat.
Okay, I can see them, so I'll just go through them then, if that's okay,
Great.
Diane. Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it says love being the primary. Well, my understanding of it is yes, because lately, especially, they've been showing me what I call the Care Bear stare, like how we are supposed to interact as beings, is pulling that energy from the grid and out through the heart chakra, and being that healed divine channel. So in order to heal all that is, so to speak, but people have kind of closed down their heart chakras a lot because of these different traumas and things, and that's why it's so important to find that healing and forgiveness for yourself. Nobody says you have to forgive those that harmed you in that sense, but forgive yourself for that, and know that they were living out their own patterns and issues and things that they're trying to work through and clear out. You know, so when I had that understanding, I was able to do a lot of healing within myself, because I had a very traumatic childhood. I didn't get into that, but because of my experiences, you know, it really alienated my family and their energies. So my brother became kind of abusive towards me. So there was a lot of things I had to forgive and heal growing up. But my take on love being the primary, yes, you know, they've given me unconditional love. When you live in that, abundance flows. But the other two things that they have given me is to find your joy. That's how you get in your heart space center. When you find joy, there is none of these thoughts being created, because you're in that moment of bliss, that moment of joy, whatever brings you that joy. That was even an after death communication from my mother. Find your joy, start dancing again. Dancing is energy movement. And if you think about when you get really lost in moving and dancing, how you're not really in a state of thought, you're in a state of movement. So they told me that's very important for healing and, connecting to earth. But joy is huge. And like I said, that energetic sovereignty, realize that, you're experiencing your reality. It's kind of, they say to me, like, stay in your own timeline is what they say to me. What other people are creating or doing is for them. You don't have to attach to that. You don't have to take it within yourself. So I think those are the three primary things I would give in as far as navigating the life of being a human and spiritual being. Did that answer your question? I'm not sure. Sarah, I think, said that. Okay. And I am located right outside Kingdom City, Missouri, is where I have moved to. And I understand this area has been very indigenous, so that might have a lot to do with it. I've had past lives as being indigenous. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, and maybe that's another reason I was drawn to this property. I know in my Beyond Quantum Hypnosis, I learned that's why the Sasquatch wanted to be with me. I've had many past lives as a Sasquatch, and also that that's where my shaman abilities come from, and my ability, because they are masters at opening portals and vortexes. So that's where that higher aspect of me and from those lives come in. So another thing they told me, just because of location, I want to bring up is, like, if you're called to be somewhere, a lot of us were called to move or be different places. A lot of people moved, especially, 2018, 2019. I was told that a lot of us moved to basically relight different areas of the grid or heal those areas. That's why we were called to move or be in certain places for their energy or to find healing for them. Did that answer Deborah's question? I'm not sure she's okay. What did Yeshua talk to you about? What did you learn from him? Have we moved to the new dimension? Yeah. Okay, those two questions. Yeshua, I don't usually talk about this because it, might set people off, but he literally said, we are equals. No one is supposed to worship me. He was really upset about that people were worshiping him, because he's like, we are equals. And if you see me, or that's almost like idolatry. And that puts you in a place where you feel beneath me, and that limits you from your own creative person. He's like, you're so that was part of some of the downloads I was getting that like triggered that whole event. And it was mostly about that, which really threw me, and it wasn't something I really wanted to be like spouting out everywhere at the time. I'm like, and he just showed me that, he's just a master alchemist. Like, he had ascended, he had learned these abilities and how to transmute from love and create from love. And that's why he was able to do the things in our reality that, people witnessed. That's
Exactly.
and that's what I learned from him, was that, and how to step into my own power, and that, if you want to create, it needs to be from that unconditional love, and be mindful of it. And just, he showed me, from my understanding with Yeshua, is he was the divine masculine and the Magdalene was the divine feminine, and they met from their heart space center. Literally, it had to do with energy from both their heart spaces to rebirth the grid. That's why, and their energy is, held that grid, this existence, so that's why people, I think, were called to feel like he was the Lord, because he did. It's basically him and the Magdalene rebooted this grid, so their energy is in there, and we sense them very strongly, but without the whole dynamic of hows or whys, all those mystic teachings formed into things that Yeshua did. Like, he was also telling me, like, all the things they claim for me aren't, weren't all mine. There were other mystics and things that, were a part of all of these abilities in creation. They were teaching all this love and how to commune with the earth grid and how to create using that energy.
Wonderful.
And have we moved to the new dimension yet? It's available from what they showed me. That's all part of finding and healing that divine masculine feminine, that it is. They've shown it to me healed. My one, a dear friend of mine said in her experience, they were showing it being healed. She's seen the same grid and that it was being healed with violet light. And I just found that out when I brought up my whole grid work the other day. So they have shown me that, the new grid is violet, it is healed, it is lighting up. But now the key to that is, how I said, like, we're all crystals on the grid, is to literally realign our divine portal to the new grid energy, is what I was being shown. And that's coming from a heart space center, like I talked about the Care Bear stare. Yeah, when living from that authentic heart space center will align you with that frequency of the healed grid. That's what I was shown. If it resonates with you, I'm happy with that. But that's just what I was shown. Does that answer that person's questions? I'm not. Is it?
I can't see who it.
It was Bencha, I think. So I'm not sure if she. Okay.
I'm beginning to get chats again.
Oh, okay. The next one says, how can we help the current state of affairs in our nation and the world at large? Things are so tumultuous right now. Well, the thing that Spirit has shown me with that is stop feeding it. Send the world love, see it from a place of love. And I know that sounds like, oh, spiritual bypass, people say all these things, but literally, because if you're feeding the thought form that it is this way, you're still creating it. You're adding energy to whoever's trying to create that narrative, because we are batteries. That's what they showed me. So, that's why it's so important for the collective I was shown to feed a narrative of a healed grid, and of that. Literally, like I said, it's just that Eden's always been here. If you want to use the biblical terms, it's just we shifted frequency. We left the garden. We shifted that frequency. So it is about bringing and healing that shift. So from my understanding, it's like, if you want to see a better world, all that comes from healing within, because what is within reflects without. Even the earth as a physical manifestation is a reflection of our energy and our state of being and thoughts. So that's just what I've understood it to be. I hope that answered your question. That is my understanding of the best way you can help is to go within, learn your own frequency. Do not allow thought forms that are not loving into your space. Literally dispel them out loud, because there are a lot of free thought forms that have been created and almost take on a life of their own, that we're always picking up in this frequency, like statics. They showed it to me like you're listening to a country radio and all of a sudden hard rock cuts in. The same thing, you're an antenna. So you need to go within, sit within, and learn your own frequency, what you feel like, because any thought form that is not yours will feel differently, and you'll know how to dispel and not feed it or attach to it. Let it flow through you. That is my understanding about how to create a more loving environment which affects the world. I hope that answered that.
It did.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Karen, let's see. Are there some things that are predestined to occur, or is it all free will choices? From my own understanding, I honestly can say that I know I made some choices. I don't have memories of pre-birth planning per se of myself. I do have a remembrance through hypnosis that I literally, from my last lifetime, jumped right into this one, because I made a choice in that one, in that particular timeline, that like I was like 12, and a gentleman followed me into the woods and did some horrific things to me and choked me and buried me alive. He thought I was dead. Anyway, and he blamed me for like having the energy that I understand now it's because I had such light energy. If you carry a lot, really can create bliss or people to be enamored of you, you know. So he was blaming her and telling her she was evil and seducing her and all this stuff, which carried over to why I had that pattern of creating suffocation. And I mean, that, you know, ways I didn't breathe, because that's how I died. And I didn't go home for healing. I literally, in the void of creation, jumped back into the next incarnation, because there was some work I wanted to finish right away. So I carried that over knowingly. And, you know, and to heal it, I figured I could heal it more in a human body, because it's easier in the density to heal some of those things than it is, you know, in a higher frequency, because it's so high you can't necessarily relate to heal that. So my understanding from that is, yeah, some of this carries over. My daughters, you know, have pre-birth memories of like being in the womb, after being sent here from their planets and different things. So I think some people, this is my, you know, take it as it is, but this is the knowing and the understanding I have, is a lot of those that were called on from these other planets, their consciousness that they agreed to project here, I believe they did plan some things, or what people call soul contracts. Like if you're sending me here, I need XYZ. You know, that's my understanding of where those come in, is these people that, you know, their source is not like of this grid. So they have some of that. I do know that because my daughter has talked about it too, and the things that I was shown. So I believe that some of that maybe, because I mean, think about it. It's like you agreeing to go on this mission, you know, to help someone else. You're going to be like, well, you better provide the food. You better provide this. I need this certain parameters of a being, and this person has to be in this place in this time period in order for me to do that mission. So that makes sense to me. That's how I see it. So I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure. My understanding is, honestly, like I keep saying, and some don't like it, that we're not all here the same. We are all equal and all beautiful light beings and creations of source, but we're not all in this earth experience, I feel, exactly the same way. So there's different parameters, like Diane was saying earlier, we're all unique. So I really believe there's that unique authenticity that not everybody has, just like not all NDEs see a tunnel. Like some of us just go straight through. And I have an understanding of this as well from doing the work that I do, is if you're not from this dynamic, when I do work to connect some people's fractals and different things, like there'll be these long tubes. If they're from a different universe or a different source type code, there's these long tunnels of, and it takes me a while to connect those consciousness because it's coming from here. So I often wonder now, this is kind of like a download because I've never talked about this before, that they're saying like, you know, that is why, you know, some people see these long tunnels because their consciousness is like going back to their, that makes sense. Because, okay, sorry. So that consciousness is trying to connect. So energetically, it sees these in order. It's almost like fiber optic. When I see them, like it looks like, you know, if you could light up neon wise a slinky, it's this tube. Yeah, and sometimes they're solid tubes. Like I had a violet tube that went on forever, and here this person, like they had a really interesting form when I connected it, you know. So that's why I think there's some difference in those type of things in the planning and everything else. But you know, the free will choice thing has to do with the choose your own adventure I was talking about. Like, you know, you can choose, like I've literally like shifted consciousnesses. Like I have like 76% on the Mandela effects quiz. Things I literally experienced in real time. They're not false memories, are not lined up with this timeline at all. Like I went to Ellis Island when Ellis Island was all one thing, and there was the museum on the bottom and the statue on the top. Now they tell me the museum's here and the statue is on Liberty Island or something, you know. No. And like my twin fractal had that movie, is it Shazam that everybody argues about? He physically has it, but it didn't exist in this timeline now. You know, and I'm constantly seeing different things like that with shifts, like what that did, you know. And you know, yeah, you know, people want to say false memory. I don't believe so, especially in these real things. And, and then when I actually went into looking into that, there was people who literally, there's old tags saying it's Ellis Island, and then there's no statue behind him and things. I laugh at that, but it makes sense to me because I experienced it. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I hope it answers your questions.
Who's next?
I'm looking here. Oh, somebody, Patty, you were worried about dancing. I have a lot of different things that I used to too, but I honestly chair dance a lot of the time if my back is out or whatever. Just to get that energy flowing, and even when I do my healings, I'll do they have me move all this energy in weird ways, but it's just getting that movement. I mean, you can do it in a chair, you can do it lying down, just the idea and the concentration of moving your energy. Yeah, I've heard Saint Germain is the violet energy. I have heard that, Deborah. That was the next question. And I'm not sure. I know that's part of, like, the violet flame is really coming in, and that it's a healing energy. And many do say that, like, he was a primary channel for that energy. So very possibly that's his purpose in it. I'm glad somebody asked this. They asked, how did you learn to trust spirit? And I'll get into some of that. But how I learned to trust spirit is, I have a dear friend who's also kind of from my soul group and the divine masculine, that says, spirit says, trust me on the little things, and spirit has done that for me. These little things like, like, you need to go out today, you need to go to a certain store. I'm like, no, and then I did, and somebody ended up meeting me, or I made a huge difference in their life. Those were like little things. Or like, don't leave this here. And a few times, like one time, it was almost like they were literally trying to show me this. I was like, I think I opened a can, how a can of fruit, and how sharp those are. And I'm like, oh, I should throw this away. I shouldn't stuff anything in here because it'll cut me. I got that note, this message like, it'll cut you, don't do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna grab everything. I didn't listen. Like, I'm just gonna grab everything that all the wrappers inside this can and throw it away. I filleted my whole finger open, and it was almost like a snicker in the background going, you didn't listen. They teach you on the little things until, like, because, and there's a huge thing with this, because they told me going forward, I've seen some of the things in the shifts and how those shifts will create certain things for, the earth is completely peaceful again, right? And they showed me that you need to learn to trust, because those guides are really higher fractals of yourself. That's literally what they showed me. Like, there are other yous that have learned more or ascended more or had different lifetimes, or even your divine source fractal. So they're like, going forward, you have to be able to trust me and react on a split second notice, and that's come into play with me were accidents that I even with my family, where I should have hit the car in front of me or been hit, and all of a sudden my vehicle will be to the side. Like, like, you need to trust and build that trust so you can react on a moment's notice, because it literally will save you. So learning and growing within that bond is very, very important. But all those little, I call it the divine GPS, but those intuition things you get, those are literally them on the sometimes the only frequency they can get you on is that intuition. And when we trust that, and we trust it enough, we start to see, and then it expands it more. Connecting with your guides is an open relationship. I was told you need to, like, speak with them, like, this is too much for me right now, or I want to learn this, if it's within, something I've chosen. The important thing I was shown with spirit is not to be specific. And my friend talks about this too, but how sometimes we have these, it's kind of like an expectation, like, I want a 2-bedroom house on 3 acres and yada, 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 and I'm trying to manifest it. That's not how spirit works, because in the void of potentiality, you just cut out 2,000 potentialities because you wanted XYZ. So it's more like, I need a roof over my head, I need food, I need a job, or it needs to have 3 bedrooms, these different things, not that it has to be a certain type of house, a certain type of place. Same with vehicles, anything you want to manifest, the universe kind of hears it literal. So, you need to leave the potentiality open and just trust, like, I'm looking for financial abundance. Now, abundance to spirit doesn't mean you're going to get $1 million or win the lottery tomorrow. It means that you will always be taken care of. It's always going to show up for you in some form when you need it. And when we're in that divine flow, that's when abundance comes, because we trust. We're not living in a place of lack. When we say, I don't have this, or I'm not capable of this, you're living in the frequency of lack.
Mhm.
And,
There's
and that doesn't.
a PS to remember with that too. That is, you don't have to accomplish it all in this lifetime. We have eternity to get it all done. So, if it's not happening, it's all right. You can do it another time.
Yes. And like I said, in my experience, you're living these other lifetimes. So what you're thinking you're trying to create here you might be creating it for this other version of you. It affects backwards and forwards. So they showed me like a ladder where you're always pulling the next frequency of you forward, and so that's the importance of, that oneness, because we're all pulling each other forward, and healing each other by being mirrors to, be this whole complete divine self. I think she had, how do we make changes we need to and let people go? That's been a hard one for me, honestly, because I was one of these people that like, oh, I send them love. I can see through them, because especially as NG ears, a lot of people have spoken to me about this. We see the soul, so we think they're this beautiful soul, and we don't see like the storyline they're playing out. And maybe in this storyline, they're more of, I don't like the term narcissist, but they're an unbalanced, unhealed, in the sense that they're on the other end of the empath spectrum. And so we get involved with these people, and then we kind of like think, well, our light and our example, we'll show them to be a better person and all this stuff. That's not our responsibility. And they will come back around. I've noticed with people that I have, when they find their healing, they'll gravitate back towards you. I literally ask spirit, anybody that is not, supportive of what the work I'm doing, or, the space I'm in, or isn't resonating with it, please remove that dissonance from my path. And it's amazing. And then you see all these people just start to kind of fade, and some fade back in as they heal. But, it's about respecting your own energetic sovereignty. You're not hurting anyone by releasing them, because you may actually be, by doing that, I tease my friend about this, the white knight syndrome. If you're always trying to save someone, they're not going through the processes that they need to do their own healing and expand, because you're always trying to catch them. You're always trying to be that person for them. And they will stay in that stagnant space for as long as you are. So you're not doing anybody any favors if you're not having a resonance with them, or you have this huge conflict to keep them in your life. I mean, you can set the intention without being like, I don't want nothing more to do with you. No, you set the intention like, I cut the cords from this, and however this person moves or out of my existence, I respect their sovereignty. Because I've found too, it's my own perception and perspective. Like if I expect certain behavior from someone, or that's the behavior we've always had, or energetically, that's an ongoing pattern through lives. If I don't stem from a place of love and I expect that, that's exactly what I'm creating, and that we have an energetic agreement to create that together. So I literally saw it firsthand. The minute I switched that perception, that person was totally different in a moment. And spirit even proved this one to me in one moment, because I always ask, can other people's energy pull us and create a situation? And it literally showed me, it literally took me out of body. And here's me and my daughter. And my daughter is sometimes, she's very OCD, so she's triggered if things aren't quite right, years ago. And they literally pulled me out of my body to show me, like, she expected me to act a certain way or react that way to what she was doing. And that her energy was literally like pulling me into her storyline that way. And so I, and I got that it was for her own healing. And so I didn't attach to like, oh, wow, that wasn't very nice, because it was part of what she was creating for her own expansion. So there is that awareness, the whole thing is not attaching. It is the story. Be the observer in those moments. Don't take it in as guilt or I'm a terrible person because I reacted that way. You're a human person with a spiritual existence. So, it's finding that compassion and forgiveness for yourself, that these things need to play out for various people, but don't let it become your story or take it in. Even your NDE, it's still kind of a story, so that just becomes your news story. Who are you authentically? You're this divine multidimensional being. For a lot of us, is how we see it. If you don't, that's okay too, but that's how my world is, and that's how I see myself. So I'm like, I don't need attached to all that stuff, because the minute you die, you're like, why? It's like all the luggage removes, and you're like, why did I take that so seriously? Why wasn't I finding joy? I was supposed to live in this childlike innocence of everything and be in wonder of Eden, and I had to create all this strife. Why did I do that? It was so stupid to me. It's silly. I was like, why did I do that? So that's my understanding of that. I hope I answered your question. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just doing. Could you tell us more about the violet grid? The only thing I've seen of the violet grid, other than, as I told you, my higher fractal's name is Sabrina, and she is one of the original grid architects that helped bring Earth from a thought form to physical matter. That's what they showed me. Take it or leave it. And so she keeps trying to show me that like we're healing this grid, and it's almost like an overlay, like it's like an overlay of the old Earth matrix. So it's like a frequency above it, and it's literally bright neon violet, the intercrossing, the squared grid. And my understanding is as we heal, we will connect with that new grid. Each person will in their own timing. The grid is healed. So, but if you have to, Earth timing is different than obviously the quantum field, that now field. So it takes longer to play out. So even though on an energetic level, that is all healed, the Earth still has to do its own healing. So we're going to see a lot more of physical events, with earth, wind, fire, water, all of those things, because that's energy. That's energy from Earth. That's how Earth manifests itself. So that's its way of cleansing all of the things that and the energies. And that's why they were showing me, like we always say, oh, ground, put all that negative into the earth and cleanse ourselves. No, we're supposed to create that whole loop to clean, because here we've spent all these years putting negative energy right into the grid, to get rid of it. So I thought that was interesting that they showed me that. I'm like, oh God, I feel like a arse. Sorry. You know what I mean? But that was my understanding of that. But that is the only thing that I have seen with how the grid looks and the color that it is and its availability. So they have recharged it, so now it's a little bit higher frequency that through our DNA and consciousness shifts we will realign with. But I hope that answers your question, and from the most I can get of my understanding of it, because I am still a human filter, right? So and like is more discordant and violent than Earth is the one that has. I'm sorry, I'll read the whole question. I'm correct in understanding that our planet is more discordant and violent than others. Does that suggest that we reincarnate on other planets as we grow spiritually? Actually, it's kind of funny. We start on those other planets kind of first. They're like the baby steps from my understanding of what I was shown. Because they are.
But there's no one way to do anything.
No, there isn't.
Path is unique. There's as many ways to do things as there are souls in the universe.
Exactly. Everybody does it differently. And this is just a story of how I have done it. But and from what I understand from that is, those planets are closer to what our source love incarnate energy is. So a lot of times, people will choose that, to get their feet wet, so to speak, to experience being in any type of form instead of a thought form, right? Not always, but that's just kind of where I've been. And Earth is kind of like the graduation mode, like the fast track kind of thing, from my understanding of, incorporating these energies, having these experiences that are so foreign to our source energy, and just to experience what that's like. Because if you think about it, if you lived in bliss all the time, how would you start to know better than to keep choosing it? We want to know and see and expand of why we make these choices. So that was my understanding of that. Let me see, understand. And those free will choices is just, my understanding is because of the density of Earth, those lower frequencies are manifest rather quickly, because they're more in alignment with the frequencies of Earth. Where when we try to manifest more higher frequency things, they used to take a long time. Like, this is what I wanted when I was a child, and now I'm finally getting it, kind of thing, because that higher frequency, it's harder to move through this density. Because this is what they showed me recently, because I'm like, why is it the minute I think or try to project, like accidentally attached to like this illness or this, that it's like instant, and the other things take me 2 days to 3 weeks to whatever. It used to take me 5 years after my first experience. Now it's faster, but they showed me, because that energy, it's harder to move energy through our density. But now that we're going into a new cycle of energy, it's easier to manifest. That's why they were yelling so much about be mindful of your thoughts and where you're putting that emotional energy in. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah.
Oh, and I got a direct message. Yeah, I guess they asked about a replay, but it'll be on the Chicago IANDS website, right? Okay.
It will be.
Somebody wanted to know about insomnia, and that one I'm not sure. As far as I know, other people have had insomnia. I think from my own experiences, like through some of those challenges, it was more like the more I attached, like, and was concerned about, would I sleep? How well will I sleep? How many hours do I need? It's that trust with your body that you'll get what you need, and that you're not working up that anxiety or thought forms of surrounded around sleep. And because I used to be like that, because like now I only sleep maybe sometimes 4 tops of 6 hours a night. And I've learned to trust my body. It's funny, because it'll literally get me up sometimes when I hear somebody message that really need me, and it'll just wake me up. You just kind of like have to trust that your body knows its own cycles. When I do my healing work as a medical intuitive as well, I've heard literally body systems or organs, like they have a voice and they have a consciousness. So, your body as a whole has its own kind of consciousness, and so you just have to trust it to do what it needs to do. That's my understanding of it. I don't know if that will help you at all, and obviously there's lots of like meditations and even supplements and things that could help you that you can look into. I don't want to give that advice per se, but that's my understanding of insomnia. It's like how much you put in it and attach to, like, and worry about if I'm going to be able to sleep. And sometimes it's things, because I notice when those create, sometimes it's because we're seeing a lot in the astral during our dream time that is very triggering to us to heal. And so then we almost get fearful of going into the sleep or theta phases. And so that can affect it too, on an energetic level, that I've noticed.
I think that's basically the questions. The rest
Questions.
is
Yeah, I saw that. Thank you for all your questions, though. Those were very good. I hope I was able to answer them in a way that resonated with you.
was wonderful. Thank you very much. All the positive comments are affirming of what a good job you did, and we really appreciate your coming. Thank you so much, Loreli, for being here. I don't ask people not to forget that we've got our Catholic priest next month, Father Nathan Castle, and we'll look forward to hearing what he has to say. It's going to be very interesting, I'm sure, and I hope you can all join us then. Take good care and stay well.
Love to you all, and thank you again for being here and being so supportive today.
Thank you.